signings here today. So we have to give his wrist a break. So yeah, those, but you can hang on to those. I know that, I believe he has one or two other signings this weekend. You can check your schedules to find that out if you would like to get his John Hancock on there, apropos since we're in Washington. But yeah, please do not ask for anything to be signed in this panel. We're mostly here just to nerd out about Hellsing, which, as I can see, a lot of you guys are fans. And as I said, I'm Sully from FUNimation. We're super excited to have brought Hellsing into the FUNimation family of shows. I personally am a huge Hellsing fan, so that's one of the reasons why Crispin was here. I really wanted to make sure that we were able to do something a little bit special since we got to release 5 through 8 last year. Most of you guys have seen that already, judging by the applause. But in case you haven't, or in case you haven't added it to your collection, we do have the DVD Blu-ray combo pack available at the FUNimation booth. We also have some other great posters and things, so definitely please come and check us out. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. And so like I said, ladies and gentlemen, Crispin Freemen.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess we're going to talk about Hellsing.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Sounds good.
Well, I want to go first to the Wayback Machine, and I want to get your initial impression of the show from your first read-through. So I know that Taliesin Jaffe, the ADR director of Hellsing, absolutely brilliant man, it was really excited about this show, and he actually mentioned that you were one of the only people he thought of for it.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what this thing called a read-through is. What's that? Who does that? We don't read through anything in voiceover. It's called step in the booth and start acting. What happened is that I was actually working as a voice actor in New York City, and I had been playing around with the idea of moving to Los Angeles. And I ended up going to a convention. This was the summer of 2001. It was for the Gargoyles animated series. Yes, and that's where I got to meet Greg Weisman, the producer of Gargoyles, who I ended up working with on Spectacular Spider-Man and on Young Justice. There was these two guys at this convention, this producer, Jonathan Klein from New Generation Pictures, and this director, some Taliesin Jaffe dude. And the two of us got to talking at the convention, and we sort of hit it off. We had a sort of similar sensibility about anime and producing anime dubs and whatnot. And so I ended up moving out to Los Angeles that fall, and I believe it was the spring or so of 2002, they said, hey, we've got this little show called Hellsing, and we need to audition for it. And we wanted to see if you wanted to audition for it. And I said, I'd love to audition for it. The challenge with casting Alucard, this was the thing that Taliesin was doing. He really wanted to sort of get it just so. And he said the problem when he was getting people auditioning for Alucard is he was getting guys who had really big, deep, scary voices, but there was no viciousness behind them. There was no sort of understanding of why Alucard sort of does what he does. And then he'd get guys who were sort of vicious and you know, just real nasty bastards, but they had no weight to their voice. They didn't sound like a heavy. And so I sort of sat down with Taliesin and I said, well, Taliesin, I think this is what Alucard is about. And he goes, you sick bastard. And so we auditioned for it, and then eventually said, yeah, we'd like you to play Alucard. I was like, great, bring it on.
Very cool. So of course for Hellsing Ultimate, we had 1 through 4 come out, and then one of the best receptions that FUNimation has ever had about the announcement of a continuation of a series was for 5 through 8. So, what were your feelings when you realized that you were going to get to step back into your Alucard shoes?
I first thought, all right, and then I thought, oh shit, you know, because we hadn't done it in so long, and it's one thing as an actor, you get sort of geared up to play a role, and when we're working on a series, usually we're going to record that series and we're going to keep recording it, even if it's something like domestic animation. Usually they try to set a recording session once a week, and so the idea is that we'll finish up the show in a number of months. Years kept passing in between these episodes, and they kept, you know, and I'd be like, oh, geared up to do Alucard, I do Alucard, oh, okay, good. And then I'd have to sit and get cold for like 2 years until the next episode came. And I have to ramp myself up again. So it was a little stressful, only because Alucard is possibly one of the most physically demanding characters for me to do vocally. And so I have to be in a really good place to do Alucard. And if I'm too tired or too cold or too tense, my vocal cords don't respond properly and I can't play them. And so every time it came up, it was like, okay, gotta run the gauntlet again. All right, am I ready? Am I ready? Here we go. And we get through it and I go, all right, I'm in a really good place. Can't we keep recording, you know? Can we do some more? No, that's all we've got. Okay. So that was, when they said we're gonna do 5 through 8, and we're gonna do 4 of them back to back, I was like, thank you. So that was quite satisfying. And then I don't even show up in like episodes 5, 6, and 7.
Kind of the Sarah's show.
Yeah, I was like, so I'm here, like great, we record some crazy stuff where he's hallucinating with Bruce Willis. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, when do we get back to the story? And they're like, yeah, we're done. Episode 8, we get back to the story with you. And I'm like, hold up. What happened with the episode? I was aware that it was sort of Saris and Pip and all that stuff, which is really great stuff. I love it. And then, you know, I do sort of come back with a vengeance in episode 8, so that was nice.
Very cool. Because actually one of my favorite moments from the continuation, unfortunately didn't include you, which was actually the part of where Zoran's very, well, not so untimely demise, and I'm sure most of you guys know what I'm talking about. So I was really excited to see some new characters come into Hellsing Ultimate as well. And I know that that it is a pretty vocally demanding role. Was there a particular moment in any between 1 through 8 that just wasn't quite clicking, that you really had to kind of stretch yourself for?
That's a good question. I'm sure there was a scream or something where it can be challenging. That's usually the problem. In order to play Alucard properly, it's in sort of the lowest register of my voice, and I have to be very relaxed in order to do it. So I get all relaxed and oh, kumbaya, I'm all great. And then I have to rip somebody's head off, which is not terribly relaxing. And it's not terribly relaxing for the throat either. It doesn't hurt my throat, but I want to give it the right viciousness that it needs for that. But it does sort of tense the muscles in the throat in order to get that sort of sound. And then I have to relax again for all the sort of, so it's always this sort of dance we have to do about, well, which lines should we record first? Because once I start ripping people's heads off, it's going to be hard for me to sound relaxed again. So that's that. But then other times, by going through the battle and ripping people's heads off, that's what makes the line work. Like, and maybe this is sort of answers your question. It was in episode 3 is Tubalcain Alhambra, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
In episode 3, I have the big fight with Tubalcain Alhambra, and I keep telling him to squeal like a pig. And there's a line where he raises back and goes, now squeal! And we couldn't get it right, like it didn't quite sound right. And I said, let's just do the fight. And so we recorded the entire fight with all the craziness, and by the end of it, I'm like breathing heavy, and I've been sort of banging my chords, and I'm all sort of roughing it, and literally like, okay, let's get that line now. Squeal! And they're like, that's it. I'm like, good, I gotta go home now. So I mean, that's the thing, because we want it to be so good, like we want it to be just so. And so that's the challenge, is making sure that we've got just the right sort of twist on what we're doing.
So, since you are very well known, at least in the anime community especially, and actually outside of the anime community as well, because Hellsing is one of the most popular, I like to call it passive anime fan, well, because you have to put it in their face and show them that it's shiny, and so like you catch the gamers and the comic book nerds and that kind of thing with a show like Hellsing.
I watch Zero Punctuation, the video game review show.
Yahtzee Croshaw is my god.
And there was one, I can't remember which episode of it is, but he brought the Alucard character up on the screen to talk about Hellsing. I was like, yeah, that's us! That's us!
Have you ever had the kind of vocal work that you did as Alucard come up with any other work that you've done? Has anybody been looking for something like that? Or are they just like, you said, you sick bastard, why would you ever do this?
Well, it's interesting. From a vocal standpoint, well, That's a good question. Yes, there is another character that I like to say is sort of like Alucard, and that would be Shizuo from Durarara. And the similarity there is that they are both sort of forces of nature. They're sort of like hurricanes. And in order to play a hurricane, I have to sort of pull all the stops. I have to sort of really, I mean, it's a good thing I'm sort of classically trained as an opera singer, because that's the only way to have the kind of gravitas to play those kind of raw, visceral characters like that. Now, what motivates Alucard and what motivates Shizuo are radically different. They're not working from the same psychological basis at all. Shizuo just has anger management issues. Alucard is a sick bastard. So it's not the same psychological place. But vocally, there are times when like I'm screaming as Shizuo when I'm screaming Izaya's name that are just, I go, wow, I'm channeling Alucard right now because it feels I'm doing the same sort of screaming thing. And now that I'm working on Fate Zero, when they cast me as Kirei Kotomine in Fate Zero, of course he's played by Joji Nakata, who plays Alucard in the Japanese Hellsing. And so I'm like, I'm never getting away from this guy. I'm going to be playing Joji Nakata's characters for the rest of my life, which is fine. He plays really cool characters. But when I wasn't sure they were going to cast me as that character, but then they did. They cast me as Kirei in Fate Zero, and I thought, okay, yeah, that's par for the course. And again, a way deep low in my range. But Kirei never gets angry. He has this just cool as a cucumber, sort of smooth as glass way of doing things. He's actually quite repressed. And so it's interesting to be hearing Joji Nakata playing the character and realizing, yeah, we're not in the same place at all mentally, because we're not ripping anyone's heads off. Even when Kirei gets in a fight, he still sounds sort of cool, calm, and collected. So those are probably the three that are closest sort of vocally to what I'm trying to do with Alucard.
Very cool. Trying to think, sorry, I apologize, I completely forgot my iPad and that had all my questions on it, so I'm kind of talking off the cuff now. In those breaks between Hellsing, I'm assuming that whenever you attended conventions and that kind of thing, you probably got a ton of questions about that. What I'm curious to know is, based off of what you have seen from Hellsing and knowing that 9 and 10 have recently come out in Japan, are there any challenges that you think you see in wrapping up the Hellsing series? Or is there something that you would like to see happen storyline-wise? Or nothing in Hellsing at all is predictable. So I just want to see, knowing the characters and knowing especially Alucard the way that you do, is there something you would like to see happen to the character?
Well, that's an interesting question. I have not seen episode 9 and 10, so I don't know where they're going. I also have not read the manga past then, because I don't want to... People are like shocked. You haven't read the manga? No, and there's a very specific reason why. If I read the manga, then I have more information than is necessarily in the animation. And so I may slide over something in the animation because I go, well, I know what that is because I read it in the manga. Well, the audience doesn't, right? The audience wants to just watch the anime and enjoy it. And so it's really useful to me to go into the anime completely I watch the episodes before we record them, but I only watch the anime because I want to make sure that I'm watching the anime and going, this makes sense to me as an audience member, this will work for anyone just walking off the street, they'll be able to follow the story, they won't have to have read the manga to get who that character is and why they're doing what they're doing. So it keeps me honest as an actor to make sure that I'm sort of staying in the moment with the character as we're going on. I think what was most revealing about what was happening at the end of episode 8, and we may be going into spoiler territory here. Hopefully, you guys have mostly seen.
Cover your ears.
But I think what was fantastic about Alucard going into the end of episode 8 and his sort of confrontation at the end of episode 8 with Anderson was this idea that he wants to be beaten, and it was an instinct that I had from the very beginning of the show. It was one of the things I told Taliesin. Taliesin kept saying, all these guys are trying to play him like a badass. And I go, that's not it. He's not a badass. I mean, he is a badass, but he's not trying to posture. He's not trying to be macho. He's incredibly bored.
That is the key to Alucard. He's incredibly bored because he's aristocracy. He is nobility. He is surrounded by plebes. He's surrounded by nothing but peasants, and not one of them can give him a good fight. That's why he restricts himself. That's why he likes playing the sub. There's only one person that he will allow to dominate him, and that's Integra. Because this one little girl showed more will and more power and more spirit than any human he had ever come across. And he thought, if this one little girl has more balls than any other man I've ever met, then I will allow her to be my master because it pleases me, because it's interesting, because I'm bored, because I'm better than everyone. I'm so powerful, I can't have a good fight. So I will allow myself to be restricted, and I will only release my power when my master tells me to, because that finally makes the game more interesting. And so I always knew that psychologically from the very beginning with Alucard, even from the TV series. Clearly that's what was going on. What I didn't understand is that he also had a more metaphysical reason for what he was doing. That's a personal psychological reason. The metaphysical reason, the cosmological reason, the theological reason is he wants humanity to beat demon powers. He is the representative of demon powers. If he is Count Dracula, which he is, Vlad ostensibly made this sort of deal with the demonic powers as a fight against God. He wanted to defeat God. And so he sort of forswore that in order to be this demonic thing. Well, he disagrees with his choice. He thinks it was probably the wrong choice. And he would really love for a human to defeat him. But it must be a human. It can't be an angel. It can't be some sort of divine figure. And that's why he gets so angry when Anderson takes the nail and starts becoming this supernatural being. Because it's screwing up the argument. The argument is humanity is enough on its own. And trying to do this sort of demonic thing is actually dangerous and is actually the coward's way out. I think there's sort of a bit of self-hatred going on with Alucard. He felt incredibly helpless, he went for these demonic powers, and now I think he regrets it on some level. And he would really love it if Anderson would kick his ass. But Anderson has to do it from the place of a human. If he does it some other way, it's cheating, you know, and so he's not happy. So that, I don't know where it's going to go in 9 and 10. And you don't have to tell me, I will find out. But it would be curious to see if Hirano-san will sort of explore that avenue, like how that's going to get wrapped up. Because now we have two titans at the end of episode 8 fighting each other. And they are sort of they're sort of the knights, they're sort of the representatives of these larger sort of cosmological powers. And I'm not sure how that's supposed to be worked out. Because Hirano-san is not Christian. You know, most of vampire lore is based in Christianity, and Hirano-san is not Christian. He's Japanese. He comes from a Shinto and Buddhist background. And obviously what he really loves about Alucard and everything else is the alchemical nature of things. I mean, Taliesin, I'm a bit of a comparative mythologist. I'm going to be doing my mythology panel tomorrow. And I like studying mythology and comparative religions, and so I consider myself a theologian. Taliesin is an occultist. His knowledge of alchemy and the Ripley scrolls and all this sort of occult knowledge is incredible. So while I'm doing things on a sort of larger hero's journey, sort of comparative religion stance, he's getting into Aleister Crowley and all this sort of hidden esoteric stuff. He's translating the Theban on the back of Alucard's gloves. I mean, that's how far down the rabbit hole Taliesin is about this stuff, and I love it. And so it'll be interesting, you know, eating my wings to make, you know, the bird of Hermes is my name, eating my wings to make me tame. This is the phrase on the Ripley skull that the alchemists were using when trying to understand what it meant to transmute lead into gold, what it meant to transmute rough, dross humanity into a more spiritual thing, what it meant to try to create the Philosopher's Stone. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's being played with. That stuff is not played with in Bram Stoker's Dracula. You know, Bram Stoker's Dracula does not address anything alchemical. You know, it's totally rooted in fears of dangerous sex and blood, because British people back then didn't trust those crazy gypsies from Eastern Europe with their tainted blood. It's all garbage, but that's what they thought. And also sort of what was taboo sexuality. When you watch Murnau's silent film Nosferatu, the vampire Dracula gets burned up in the sun, right? Except that he was in the sun earlier in the movie with no problem. The reason why he gets defeated at the end of Murnau's film is because Wilhelmina willingly gives herself to him. and weans him of his homosexual tendencies. Because remember, he was feeding off of Jonathan Harker before. But because she is willing to bring him back to good traditional heterosexuality, then that's what defeats him when the sun rises, you know? So vampires have always been sort of exploring what is the boundaries of acceptable sexuality. And so that's why Hellsing, I think, is so captivating now, is because it works on this BDSM level. Of course, now that's Am I saying something you didn't know? Right? No, you don't have a first name. Your name is Police Girl. I mean, you can't get past the first episode and we're in BDSM land. Which back when Hellsing came out was really sort of, ooh, edgy. Now there's like 50 Shades of Grey and everyone's reading it on their iPad and it's like no big deal. But you know, that was sort of the idea, is that vampires are always sort of on the edge of what is acceptable or what is transgressive sexually. And so I'm curious to see where he's going to go. Because Hieronymus loves bringing in the Crusades and the Templars and everything else. And he's been doing a pretty good job of it theologically, but I go, wow, how are you going to wrap this up? You know, does the Archangel Gabriel come down and kick everyone's butt? Or like, what's going to happen here? Like, how is this going to get resolved? I have no idea. I can't wait to find out.
Very cool. I was actually really excited when you specifically brought up the relationship between Alucard and Integra, because that's actually one of my favorite parts of the show.
Yeah.
So especially from a dominant and submissive sort of relationship, because you obviously one would think that, you know, Alucard would be the one in charge, but it's the fact that he makes the decision.
That'd be a bad idea.
Well, I mean, but he makes the decision that this is what I'm going to do. This once again, it entertains me and that kind of thing. Can you maybe riff a little bit about his relationship with Ceres?
Well, that's the interesting thing. He's been locked up in a basement for all this time because he's been bored out of his skull. This one little girl shows all this sort of chutzpah and spine, and he decides, she's my master. I will obey what she says. Between control art restrictions and everything else. Even when he's like, people are coming to attack him, he's like, can I kill them? Can I kill them? Can I kill them? He won't do it until she says so. And when she says search and destroy, then, you know, the gloves come off and he'll go for it. But then, this little police girl shows up in the mix of things. And he's not quite sure what to do with her, because she's just so cute, you know? Oh, you're just a treat. And I think it was actually explored a little more deeply in Ultimate. In the TV series, he goes, no, she's joining Hellsing organization. And Integra just goes, you don't make decisions. And he goes, the police girl made the choice for herself. I didn't disobey you, Odom. She made the call. I didn't disobey your orders. It's not my fault. And she goes, it's time for us to leave. And off she goes. And so we go, oh, okay, now he's got his own submissive toy to play with. But it's very different in the OVA, because she goes, why did you do that? You know, you've been quite happy being the sub this whole time. Why are you now taking a sub? And he goes, I don't know. It's sort of sense of whimsy, you know? Because what's interesting is that he tries to get Ceres to join him. He tries to get Ceres to be equal to him. Because I think initially he's thinking, I want a friend. I want a partner. I'm a big Doctor Who fan. Most of Doctor Who's companions are totally not as powerful as him, right? They're humans or other things, but there was one, Romana. Yeah. Romana the second, especially the blonde one played by Lala Ward with Tom Baker, Romana was a Time Lord. You had 2 Time Lords in the TARDIS at the same time. Fantastic! It was so great to have a companion for the Doctor who was just as powerful and frankly more capable than he was. And here's Alucard saying to Ceres, all right, drink the blood and you'll be like me and then we can go be sort of buddies together. And Ceres goes, no. And he goes, oh really? So you want to play the sub game too, do you? Fine, you won't drink the blood? You're my slave. My name is Ceres. No, it's not. It's Police Girl. Shut up. Right? You don't get to be called Ceres Victoria until you drink the blood, right? Until you're willing to step up and take responsibility for who you are and what you are and be who you are. I'm not calling you by your first name. And that's what's so great about episodes 5, 6, 7 is that she steps up. She gets pushed to the absolute limit and she finally says, I've had it, and starts ripping things, and that's when he comes back, you know, and does the little pat on the head, because he's like, my little girl's all grown up. So by the time he shows up in episode 8, she is an equal. That's why she can stand alone with Integra, and Integra feels completely safe. She's like, I'm not dealing with this little girl who doesn't know how to shoot a cannon anymore. I'm dealing with a force of nature. I've got 2 of them. What have you got? An army of crusaders? Nazi vampires? I've got 2 hurricanes. Step back. You know, you got nothing compared to what I got. So.
Very cool. Well, since we do have about 20 minutes left, I wanted to go ahead and make sure that if you guys had some burning questions, that we would have the opportunity to answer those. So, yes, gentleman in the navy shirt.